Hello, everybody. Let's talk Scream 8. Because we know what's going to happen. This movie's made way too much money. Kevin Williamson said that he had an idea with Ned Campbell. So we know it's going to happen. And this is going to be my pitch on things. Because why? I just keep remixing ideas and stuff too because I have ideas and new movies come and new movies go. And that's the fun of this. But let's talk Scream 8. Or Scream 8 as an ATE. Yum, yum, yum. I've had this idea for a long time, and I just got to keep remixing it because characters change. But here is my opening scene. My opening scene is Yale is broadcasting live on TV. Chad and Mindy are doing their thing with her still, picking up where the last one left off. Um, and it's an anniversary of some sort. They want Yale to cover it. So it's some sort of anniversary tying to the Woodsboro or the stab, whatever. I got to sit down and do the timeline. And um, she gets a phone call live because she's taking calls, and it's from Mark Kincaid. And it's Mark Kincaid, and he's sitting there, and it's taught. She like, oh, Detective Kincaid, okay, who worked on, you know, blah blah blah. And he answered, and it's Mark's voice at first, and then it clicks to the killer and talking to her, and then we see the killer is holding Mark hostage, basically, and then starts talking to Gail, threatening about how this is the end, it all ends, uh, everything's going to be erased, it's done, the families, blah, blah, blah. And it's time for the story to end. Every beginning has an end, and we're going to go back to where it started, and no survivors. Stabs Kincaid through the throat. Okay. And then the line goes dead, and Gail's freaking out. Then, boom, out of nowhere, Ghostface steps up and kills Gail on live TV. And then attacks Mindy, stabs Mindy. Chad tries to fight it off, but then Ghostface just leaves the knife in Mindy and walks off and just says, it all ends. As the police are showing up because it was alive. Maybe she's in a television studio just to make it feel more like nowhere is safe. And boom, Scrimate. So your opening kill kills off 3 returning characters. All right. So then we pick up. The idea is that nobody is safe anymore. Okay? And that the killers are starting it from going back to where it begins and starting from the beginning and wiping out. And it all started where? With Maureen Prescott and her bloodline. So this killer wants to wipe out everybody connected to any of it because they're tired of the story. So this is where we're going to get into. I'm going to use 4 killers because I like the idea of having killers. I know, like, oh, we're just keep adding people, right? But hear me out. Killer number 1, Leslie Mocker, Stu's sister. And what we find out is it was Leslie Mocker who was working with the other killers. She's the one that burnt down the Mocker house in Scream 7. And she was supposed to show up and was around in Scream 7, but didn't show up at the end. Um, she was supposed to be like a fallback, you know. Once everyone thinks they're safe, they're boom, surprise. Okay? And the idea with her as a killer is, you know, Billy's family has pretty much been eliminated. and Billy's line, and her family's been ruined. Her nephew was killed because of ties to Sydney and this legacy, um, and everything that's connected is going to be broken, basically. Martha will be back. She'll be hunted and killed later in it. Uh, but Leslie's parents, kind of abandoned her. They left Woodsboro. They changed their name even because they were harassed. And Leslie got married, lived there, tried to raise her son, but broken marriage, abuse, and then we saw what happened to Vince. Um, and she kind of blames it on Sydney. Why? Because people always want someone to blame, not her brother. Um, Second killer, I think it's Christine, but it would be the Christine Carpenter. So what we find out is that was Billy's girlfriend. He was dating, got her pregnant, or he wasn't dating her. He was fooling around with her. He was dating her at the same time he killed uh, Maureen, and then broke up with her or stopped, messing around with her to then focus on Sydney. And she thought she was in love with Billy. She was going to bring her with her boyfriend. When she got pregnant, and then Billy didn't know the baby was his. Um, she didn't tell Billy all this, right? But now she blames Sydney because if Sydney hadn't come along, she would have gotten Billy, and Billy wouldn't have been a psycho, and they would have raised their daughter and been happy because she truly loved Billy more than she loved the man she married, who would be Tara's dad. And so that's our second killer. And of course, because of Sydney and Billy, her daughters have been pulled into this. But the third killer, this one's the hard one, but this is speculation. I would go back and bring back Samantha Carpenter, and she's the surprise third killer. And she ends up having to kill her own mom because you find out they've been placeboing her pills, um, messing, like pushing her psychosis over. And she has a psychosis from both sides of the family. And we all know the Loomis line is crazy. And she kind of went, she's trying to be tough, but her dark side is almost taken over to where it's almost like she doesn't realize she's doing it. And we know that she was teetering on the line because 2 times she stabbed people, and then the second time she actually wore the costume, and we see it, and she starts to slowly lose it and turn to the dark side. And that's what's happening to Samantha Carpenter. Now, the fourth killer would be a new character. I think it's one of the things. It'd be a younger character, someone that will, we introduce who's working alongside them, who is kind of the young, newer person, Patsy. But the idea is you're trying to erase everything, every survivor. So I would bring Kirby back as the FBI. You know, I'd make her even more like badass than she was in six. I feel like six lacked that. Gail should have been absent in six with Kirby's return, and all of kind of Gail's plot points and what she was doing should have been Kirby. We should have seen Kirby as a more competent FBI agent. and it really shows like how the ghost face attacks, change people for what they do with their lives. I'd bring Kirby back. I would not kill Kirby, um, but she would be back in my movie. Of course, Tatum would be back. Uh, Mark, Sydney's two younger kids. Sydney. Now Chad is, with Sydney and Mark trying to like rally around as they're trying to figure out what's going on. And we already know, like based on the opening scene, there were at least two Ghostface killers because one was where Kincaid was in LA, and one is wherever Gail was, be it New York or whatever, she's at. So we're already operating that there were two killers in two locations. So it's a little bit more uneasy. Um, I think, you got to have the one killer that you're trying to figure out who it is. Scream 7, there was never like, oh, it's easy to, trying to figure out who the killer is because they're who's in the scene, who's not in the scene, who's gone. All the killers were in basically no scenes. So we couldn't really figure out who they were. But I think it's kind of a neat idea of like how every story needs an ending, but every ending's a new beginning as well. And what we say about the idea of how franchises and stuff needs to stop, or how a story loses value with diminishing return, even though we enjoy it. It goes back to Scream 6 when they talked about franchise just being chapters, and how the idea of a solid trilogy, a beginning, middle, end story, has lost because we keep sequelizing. Um, and I think that's a commentary on like when does something deserve to rest. You know, um, can you do Scream? Like, could you reboot Scream? As a question where you start over and just remake the first one. No, because the whole idea is it's a meta commentary, and that was the whole point of four about rebooting and stuff like that. But the story is about Maureen's murder, and then where Billy and Stu took it from there and did it and I'm just I think it would be interesting to see how a a good person gets corrupted by their environment, almost like if you're a DC Comics fan, the whole concept with Joker, the one bad day, right? The what broke the Joker made him into the Joker. Like how much pain and suffering, and the idea that we all go through trauma. The experiences that we have shape us, but what do we do with that? Sydney's whole thing is she's tried to overcome it, and in Scream 7 was someone took the wrong lessons, and are we responsible for the wrong lessons learned by our experiences? Um, Sydney's worked through her trauma. She's trying to, work past it. But then some people internalize that trauma and let it overcome and take over their life. And I could see where that could be what corrupted Leslie Mocker and Mrs. Carpenter. Um, Tara is the only character like I would not have in it or be attacked. Like she's kind of hidden and they're trying to protect her. And like Sam is kind of this Jekyll Hyde character, almost like a ghost face working not with the other ghost faces. I've always liked that idea that while you have the ghost faces who are working together, someone else is then starting to do their own kill spree so that they can pin it on the ghost faces. And I think that's how Samantha gets triggered is it starts again and it like that's what triggers inside of her and she starts doing her own thing. Um, because you could have a really neat scene where you have Ghostface Sam's mom gets killed by Ghostface Sam, and then you have Sam just completely lose it and still trying to kill everybody. But I think the fallen hero can be a very interesting storyline, and I think that would have been neat to see what they would have done with that, with their original idea for Scream Seven, because you have the clues are all there. Um, I would bring Danny back too as a supporting character. He would definitely get stabbed, but he would live. Um, so yeah, that's kind of where my head's at working with the Scream Eight. Thanks for following along and listening. Let me know your thoughts. Okay, so I did a little bit more thinking, and if you don't do Samantha Carpenter as a killer, this is one I had written down before and I totally forgot because I've been running through my head. I would bring back Angelina Tyler, and she would be one. So it'd be Angelina, Mrs. Carpenter, Leslie Mocker, and then a new character. If you bring back Samantha, like I think Samantha would be interesting as like a good guy, a protagonist wrestling with their dark side, and her almost being more of a hunter of wanting to go after them. But I would bring back Angelina Tyler and the idea that, you know, she was an obsessed, she was obsessed with Sydney as an actress, but she was in love with Roman, and she learned that Sydney was Roman's sister and hated her for what she, caused Roman to go through, and that whatever their plan was in three, where she was like supposed to be dead, but then she didn't make it up in time or whatever, and saw Roman had already died and just left, and then has been laying low, but she can't take it anymore, and she decided to, start finding like-minded people who had also been scorned by Sydney and this whole stab Woodsboro thing, and she organized this group. And I like the idea of this group of people. And it goes back towards like what Kevin Williamson had talked about once before when he was going to do like a cult that like uh not worship but like people who were obsessed with it did their own little cult group in an idea he had for Scream 3, and then um a group who, what do you call it, who will worship Stu in a way, but like this idea of just a group of people who have come together and are working together, almost like a Murder on the Orient Express type thing, where there's multiple people and it's like makes it even more challenging. But Angelina would definitely come back to close the circle.